Hello and welcome back to the devlog of my game MIN-0. This is devlog number 3. Very early prototyping still. In this devlog we're trying to do some basic ideas about how the little ship can fire a weapon and fire that weapon at doors and the doors then open. Let's crack on. So to make the weapon I literally just did a small circle which I thought, oh I know, I'll export it like this. Then I won't have to think about sort of generating it on the nose of the ship. I can just go from there. While I was there, I also changed the thrust slightly, so we've got a small, medium and large thrust, so I can demonstrate how hard the trigger's being held down. When I put this into the game, the thrust was fine. You can see we got a small, medium, and that works quite well. You can pretty much hover on medium, and yeah, it seems to animate nicely. And when I started firing, initially I thought that was pretty good until I decided to rotate, and oh dear, we've got a problem here. And I guess the problem here is we're instantiating the bullets as a child of the ship itself. So when the ship rotates, the bullets lose their sort of own position, if you like. They're being overridden by what we're doing with the ship. So I guess we need to do something different. Just to explain what I used there, I've got my basic weapon, which you can see is that little blob, and a little script for it, which literally just says go up. So I was intending to use the child bases of it being from the ship in order to just say up is whichever way it's facing, and then we just send it in that direction and we multiply it by speed and delta. I've taken out this bit here which says if it hits anything, then delete it, because it was appearing in the wrong space when I started it. And then what I did, which I thought was perfectly reasonable, is this. So I said if we press fire, then instantiate the bullet scene. We get the bullet scene by preloading it, and we just then add it as a child. What Godot doesn't tend to want you to do, because obviously I'd just like this to go as no child of anything, but this scene has loads of its own nodes, and Godot seems to want you to have things be able to work individually in a scene. So there's no way of creating a child in here that isn't a child of the root, because the root is the thing that gets rotated. On Unity I would think about finding the right game object somewhere else in the tree that I could attach it to, but the Godot documentation basically advises against that. It seems to suggest that the node paths it describes as brittle and prone to problems. So it actually wants you to use signals. So the way we do that, instead of saying let's instantiate a scene here, we just say we're going to put a signal in to say we fired. Okay, got that working. A little bit of faffing about, but it seemed okay. It still seems weird though. The general gist in Godot, you should never go and find nodes up the tree, but you're okay looking for nodes down the tree, which is a bit weird. It's like one direction not allowed, the other direction you are allowed. You can do it if you want to, but it's not the right thing. Anyway, so in my little bit of player code now, I've now got the signal that says shoot with the node. Actually, that should be bullet scene rather than node, but there you go. Bullet direction and bullet position. And when we press fire button, I work out the direction, which is this handy cosine rotation and sine rotation, which basically turns your rotation into a vector 2 direction. And then we do this emit the signal, putting our bullet object or scene object, the direction which we've just worked out, and the global position of a spawn point. What I did, I went in and added a spawn point so it knew where to go, which is this thing here. This is called a 2D marker node, which is quite handy. And I also went ahead and slightly redid the bullet, so it's slightly bigger and it's right in the middle, so it will appear where I tell it to appear basically. And then over on the race prototype, which is kind of the parent node, which will eventually go into some global thing, what I do in the ready function is get the node. See, we're quite happy getting this node because it's downstream, and we're connecting to the shoot signal, and then saying if you get that signal, call on shoot, and then on shoot takes in the variables we've got, spawns the instance of the bullet and adds it to this new folder. This is just basically a simple node. It's the most basic thing you can get. I just use it as a holder, which I've called instantiated stuff. So we add that spawn bullet to instantiated stuff, and then we change the direction, the position, and then we let the velocity do its own thing. And that looks like this. Slightly bigger, but if we rotate around, our bullets don't go everywhere. You probably noticed we've got a few things to sort out next, which is like they need to hit things, and you know, I don't want to let people basically fire that many bullets, so we'll have to do something about that. But that's easily done. But yeah, the whole signal thing is quite different from what I would have done in Unity, so a bit weird to get your head around first time. So the bullet is an area 2D, which is something where you can check if it's basically entered another collider. The idea being you can easily deal with collisions. But if I fire it, and what I've said is if you collide with something, disappear, basically free up, you can see that the bullet goes somewhere into the scenery before it's detected. And if I change it so it doesn't disappear and just shows the bullet, then we get this. And you can see they go in a different number of times every part there. And I believe this is a similar problem to what I had before with the jitter. Basically the physics loop, I think, checks for collisions, but the main game loop is there doing the movement of the bullet. So the bullet can go some way in before it's actually detected that a collision has taken place. So this is where we have to bring in a raycast. The idea is we draw an imaginary line between the ship and the bullet and see if we've actually hit anything, because we could have the situation where we pass completely through it without detecting a hit. So what I did is I set up a raycast, and I said as soon as we have a hit detected, then go back and draw an imaginary line from the start point of the bullet to where it actually intersects, and we colour that in red. And you can see that, yeah, brilliant, this is accurate and stuff, but I'm feeling this is a bad situation. This is a possible corner case, because we could still pass through something on the way to the scenery and only basically register a hit with that eventually, and then my raycast would actually hit the thing. Or because the bullet is not that fast, it's possible that during the time we fired the bullet, something could go into its path and then we'd hit that again. So we need something slightly more dynamic to find the right points to check between. And what I thought we'd do is take the last point before we detect the hit and raycast there, because surely that bit would be outside and the detection hit would be inside. So if I change the code to check between the old position and the position, firstly I noticed I wasn't getting collisions, and when I sort of tried to visualize that using the blue and the reds, firstly I seem to get some sort of timing thing where they seem to be in the same position, and then you can see where what we've actually got with this green and blue, that even though we're in the previous position, we're still inside the collider. So that's why we're not getting a collision there. So the reason for this is because we're getting too many updates in the main loop, and the physics loop to check the raycast only goes once every 60th of a second. So I need to manipulate that to be kind of the old point, but the old point that the physics loop knows about instead of my main loop. Okay, so by shifting the logic of where the old position is into the physics loop, we've got something that works, and this is going to look exactly the same as when I was showing you before, but the difference this time is it's checking between each position, so it's always got the last old position that it checked before the bullet went in. So what I'm going to do with this is clean it up so you can't ever see any of the bullets going into the scenery, which I can do with just putting them behind the scenery, and perhaps some, you know, just small and subtle particle effect when we hit something to say, oh, you've hit something. Might be nice. So what I did then is create a quick particle scene by following a tutorial, and it just looks like that. I thought, yeah, that looked quite good. I had a slight problem doing this in that I wanted to then clean all my particles up, so I have to Q3 them. But because I decided to instantiate a particle effect from the bullet and then I wanted to Q3 the bullet, that would have taken out the particle. I looked in the documentations and there was a signal called finished. I thought, oh, I'll just connect to that signal and wait for it to be done and that will be fine. And that didn't seem to work, and it didn't twig for ages that is a specific to 4.2, and there's no signals on 4.1. I was using 4.1, so I upgraded the project quickly to 4.2. That didn't seem to cause a problem, and that bit worked then. So you can see when we get a hit, we do this thing called create a hit effect. The create hit effect instantiates a particle, and it finally works when we connect the finish signal to it and just call the method cleanup, and cleanup just removes it. And if we run that, okay, I mean, yeah, that's working, but maybe a little bit big. Okay, I mean, that looks a little bit over the top. It looks a bit nuclear, doesn't it, going on? I kind of like the colour ramp it does. But I did spot one problem doing this, and that seems to be how the scrolling background draws. If I fire and get that particle, you can see as we go just outside, the particle effect seems like it can disappear very easily. Similarly, if we fire upwards, it doesn't appear till we're on the screen, which is an interesting one. Potentially problems to sort out at another time, these ones, and because this is certainly not going to be the final. This is like if I've launched a missile at it or something big, this is good, but I just wanted a couple of bits of dirt firing up at this point, so this is a little bit over the top. But I'll have to find out why it's it's not working if the position is off screen. Obviously this is some automatically done thing that's, oh, you're not on the screen, we won't bother drawing it, but it's drawing in the visible space, but it just doesn't know it because the sort of origin point's gone. Interesting. Anyway, part of the reason I wanted to do this and have a specific explosion on this one is because I wanted to detect what I was hitting and change the explosion based on that. So for example, I want to do these doors, and when I hit the door, I don't want a big explosion, I just want the doors to open, which I guess is the next thing to do. Let's open some doors. Well, it might need some work, but I'm looking forward to picking this up and putting it in the done section and then moving this into there. Oh, it feels like I've done something. Okay, so doors. What I decided to do was a sort of sliding door. So I have two of these long sprites and then sort it out with some basic bits of holders for the landscape. Again, everything is just temporarily holding sprite until I redo them. So I then imported this into Godot, and what I did, I made sort of a left door and a right door, and also made a left collider and a right collider. And what I decided to do is use the animation player to simply animate this, because I could add tracks to change the position of both the doors and the collider. So I can play that forward, they simply open, play it backwards, and they close. And what I could do in my code that sent the raycast is detect exactly what it hits. So when it hits the wall, I do the explosion. When I hit the door in the script, I just simply play the open, and then I have a little timer here that runs for 5 seconds, and when the signal that the timer's finished, it basically plays it backwards, so closes it back up again. So I did a horizontal one and a vertical one for this. And if I tried the game here, what I did, I hadn't really figured out how I want them and how big they should be. As you can see, it's sort of solid. And so I've got, if I hit that, it explodes. But if I hit the door opens. And then if we wait around 5 seconds or so, closes again. And we've got a similar one down here for the vertical door, which we can go through quite happily. Make explosions, then it closes. Oh no, I can't get through. And because I can call this from the weapon's own code, it means it's very easy for me to determine what door can be opened by what, and have the right missiles or lasers or guns to actually open these, which is cool. Okay, so we've got firing, we've got particle effects, over the top ones admittedly for hitting the wall, and a good way of detecting my bullet actually hitting something. It makes me think actually that the concept of most of the collider stuff within Godot is fairly useless in terms of being able to detect most hits. I get the idea of the area 2D node, which is actually what my bullet uses in terms of just having this area, and you want to know when something's gone in the area and when something's left it. But in terms of sort of detecting fast moving things, it's a bit useless, and you're always going to need a raycast. But fortunately, that raycast will always report back what it hits and give me the object reference, so I can literally call methods within that object directly, which is quite a good way. Anyway, I wanted to go on and do the thing about transitioning through scenes, but this video is already quite long and this is quite a complicated subject. Well, complicated maybe, it's got some real fundamental things I need to think about more. So we've got several things to really consider here. First off, if we're going into a scene, let's call it a room, and it's got an entrance on the left and an entrance on the right. How do we know we're going through one way, and how do we tell the scene that? And also in that scene, how do we think about objects that are not permanent? So looking at the Metroid example, if we go into a room and it's got a missile pickup in there, so you know it unlocks the missile weapon. If we get that and leave and go back in, it's not going to be there again. So we need some way of having this representation of a certain amount of global data for each scene. What is there at the moment? How have we got in? How are we leaving? How are we transitioning to that scene? Where are we putting the ship? And what sort of velocity are we giving it and direction when we get in there? So these are all things to consider, which is why I think it's quite a big subject. But I'll have a think about that and carry on with it. In the meantime, any questions, pop them down below. Please subscribe if you get the chance, and like the video, all that sort of YouTube stuff. That'd be handy. I'll catch you next one. Bye for now.